guys, my name is Megan. I'm one of the Delight leaders this year. I'm sure you've heard from me / will see me around. This week I'll be walking us through our chapter on Remembrance in the Delight book. So yeah, let's get started. I'm out on my balcony right now, so my neighbors might think I'm a little crazy out here like talking to myself, but maybe they'll get something out of this too. So for Remembrance, the first part, like the scripture part we focus on, is based on Joshua chapters 1, 3, and 4. Basically what happens in these few chapters is that we're at the point now in the Bible where Moses is dead and the Israelites still need to make it to the promised land that God had promised them. And so God upholds his end of the bargain, and he decides that Joshua is going to lead the Israelites to this land that he promised them. So we start off with Joshua 1:9, in which they start their journey. We know it's going to be a tough one, but they make it to the Jordan River and realize like how are we going to cross this massive river with literally all of us. And Joshua prays about it, and God says to take the Ark of the Covenant with them when they get to the river, and that basically like just to trust in him, he's got it all figured out. So Joshua does it, and they get to the river, and as they're crossing the river starts to dry up. And that leads us to chapter 3. But before we get to chapter 3, I do want to note in Joshua 1:9, there's one verse that they point out in the book that I think is just really good to remember. And it says, "Have I not commanded you? Be strong and steadfast. Do not be dismayed. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." And obviously this is just one example of times that God has kept his promise to stay with us whenever, but especially during this season of life, I think it's a nice reminder that God is with us through every peak and every valley that we face. Then we move on to Joshua chapter 3, in which this is when they're actually crossing the river, and the river starts to dry up, but it doesn't dry up super fast because it's a river. So it takes 3 days, and obviously the people are getting a little panicked that the river's not going to dry up, that God promised us this land and we're not going to make it across. You know, as humans, we all start to get in our own heads and sometimes don't always trust what God has in store for us. But they stay patient and they keep praying, and God ends up drying this river for them, and they're able to cross. So once again, just continuing to put our faith in God, even when we're not really sure where our life is headed or what's coming our direction. And then finally we make it to Joshua chapter 4, in which they finally cross the river, and they're so thankful that they decide to place a memorial by the river. They take rocks and place rocks along the river so that, quote, this is from the book, they could picture the tangible monument, pass on the story to new generations, and recall the original promise that God spoke, that the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. So in moments where they maybe wouldn't feel God's presence, or where the next generation wouldn't feel God's presence, or they weren't really sure, they could go look at this tangible monument as a reminder that God was with them once and he will always be with them. So then that leads us to the Remembrance story that Jacqueline Wood shared with us. And she talks about how she didn't have faith in God and Jesus, that she just did not believe. And one day some friends invited her to go to church, and she was hesitant, but at the last minute decided to go. And she saw the way that people responded to worship, and she knew in that moment, even though she couldn't see physically, like a physical God, like you couldn't see him, you could feel him, and she knew that he was there. And I think it's so hard sometimes to remember that the way God works in our lives isn't always physical. We're not always going to see it, but he's still there. So yeah, so she talks a lot about how whenever she needs a tangible way to remember God, she worships or looks at other people worshiping because it reminds her of the way that God is present in her life. One thing I really liked that she said was, quote, "That's the thing about the power of God's presence. You don't have to know everything to trust it. You just take a step and watch the miracle unfold in front of you." And just think about how many times in our own lives we have no direction, we have no idea what direction we're headed in. We just have to put all of our faith in God and let Him do the work, because like that He did with the Israelites, we know that He will always show up when we need Him. Another thing I think that's very important to shout out is being still. She mentions that. There's a verse in the Bible that says, "Be still and know that," be still and know, basically. Be still and know that I am God. So just taking a moment to stop panicking, to stop being worried, and just reflecting and knowing in our hearts that God is with us. So I thought I would take this time to, because at first I read the story and I was not really sure how I related to it. I knew that I probably had a moment, but it's taken me forever to film this video because I was just praying and reflecting and just waiting for like something to stand out to me in my life. But I guess this is going to be my little testimony with this. So I'm going to focus primarily on having that tangible thing to remember back to when our faith is shaken, because let's be real, we all have moments in our lives where we just do not feel God, or we don't like the way that He's working in our lives, or we don't trust what's happening. Been there many times myself, as I'm sure all of you probably have as well. So I want to take this moment to talk about a time in my life that I go back to when I have those moments that I don't know if God is with me, as a reminder to myself that yes, I know He is right here with me walking through this valley. There's two distinct moments in my life that make me know God's presence is real, and at least that I could feel it. The first is what I'll talk about today. The second was a really low point for me in high school. It was a time that I was just very lonely and felt kind of isolated, and I ended up obviously getting out of that time. Felt a lot better, but that journey, looking back on, that is one way that I have made me feel God in my life. But what I'm going to talk about today is my confirmation. So I am Catholic, was raised Catholic, and one of the sacraments that we practice in the church is confirmation. So usually around age 13, probably about 8th grade-ish, is usually I feel like when people get confirmed. You choose a saint, and basically a saint that you look up to as a role model, and that's supposed to be someone that you can pray to when you just need someone to look out for you. So my saint is Saint Rita of Kasha, which she is the patron saint of desperate cases. But so anyway, I was going to get confirmed. I was in 8th grade. My parents are divorced. I've never had a time in my life, I never remember a time when all of us were together, which honestly is kind of a blessing, and I guess a curse at the same time. But I never had a moment we were all together celebrating our faith until my confirmation. My dad's family was there, my mom's family was there, as they knew that this was a really big step in me proclaiming my faith. And my mom has always been someone that I looked up to in my faith. She's definitely my role model for how I want to practice my faith. Just always putting others first, acting out of love. Not that my dad isn't, but I've never really had the hard conversations about faith with my dad. whenever I like don't feel God in my life, I can sit down with my mom and be like, listen, I just do not feel him. I'm praying. I'm not hearing anything back. It's like radio silence. And my mom is very much the person I go to for that. Until this day when I was confirmed, my dad slipped me a card after the mass. And I still have this card to this day that is just a short little message about the importance of having faith, and that there will be times in your life where you don't understand what's going on, where you'll be sad or scared or confused, but that it's so important because God always pulls through. And that was like hearing that from my dad. I remember just being like, oh my God, like this is real. This is real. So I still have that card, and I keep it tucked in this little box in my room. And the days where I just am like, I just do not feel God today, I go back and I'll look at the card. I know sometimes people will put like little pebbles or rocks in their bags, and so when they touch the pebble or rock, they'll remember to pray. And that's, I think sometimes just having that tangible reminder, whatever it is for you, maybe it doesn't have to be tangible. Maybe it could just be a memory or a feeling that you had once, or something that made you see the beauty in life. Being able to go back to that thought or memory or tangible item in those moments where you can't feel God is so important. It's just, it helps so much with your faith when you feel like you can't hear him. So yeah, that's my little talk. We'll probably break out into small groups now and further discuss, but it was great seeing you guys. Thank you for listening.